It is late April in the year 2026, and the autumn sun, hanging over Sydney's Coogee Beach, is as bright and unyielding as the camera flash is currently illuminating the stately, historic facade of the five-star Intercontinental Hotel. The ocean breeze carries the faint, familiar scent of salt and eucalyptus, offering a sensory reminder of the relaxed Australian coastline. Yet, just beyond the pristine, meticulously manicured entrance of the venue, the atmosphere is far from a relaxing coastal retreat. The scene unfolding on the streets is one of strict security protocol, heavy logistical coordination, and a mounting, palpable public frustration that has been quietly brewing for weeks. Dozens of New South Wales police officers stand guard at the metal barricades, their expressions stoic as they methodically manage road closures, redirect local traffic, and secure the perimeter against curious onlookers and the ever-present lenses of the paparazzi. Their physical presence, their highly coordinated time, and their rapidly accumulating overtime are all being funded directly by the Australian taxpayer. But inside the hotel's opulent ballroom, safely shielded from the noise, the scrutiny, and the friction of the street, an entirely different kind of transaction is taking place, one that has absolutely nothing to do with public service and everything to do with private, highly monetized profit. Women in pristine, carefully curated designer attire are handing over remarkable sums of money for a fleeting, highly controlled experience. The pricing tiers for this particular wellness retreat reveal a stark commercial reality that leaves very little room for imagination or ambiguity regarding its ultimate purpose. A standard ticket to the event is priced at $2,699 Australian dollars. For those seeking closer proximity to the marquee name, the premium VIP tier demands a staggering $3,199. These attendees are not gathering in this ballroom to donate to a global charity. They are not funding a philanthropic foundation, a community initiative, or a grassroots movement designed to enact tangible social change. They are paying for a luxury package, the undeniable highlight of which is a brief, carefully orchestrated group photo opportunity with Meghan Markle. The contrast with the not-so-distant past is impossible to ignore, and for many Australians navigating the complex realities of the modern economy, it is a rather bitter pill to swallow. To fully understand the current friction, one must look back exactly 8 years. In 2018, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex toured this very same country as working, elevated members of the British royal family. That inaugural tour was widely considered a triumph of institutional public relations. Back then, they were greeted by hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens lining the streets of major metropolitan hubs like Sydney and Melbourne, as well as regional agricultural towns like Dubbo. During that tour, the public stood patiently in the pouring rain, holding hand-picked flowers, handmade signs, and offering genuine, overwhelming affection. The couple, newly married and expecting their first child, represented the dawn of a modern era for an ancient establishment. It was a classic, flawless display of soft power, a living, breathing bridge between a historic institution and the modern Commonwealth. The royal aura they carried was not something that could be bought. It was bestowed by the state, anchored by a lifelong commitment to duty. Today, however, those massive, organically cheering crowds have been replaced by velvet ropes and private security details, and the organic goodwill of a nation has been systematically replaced by a credit card machine and an event planner's itinerary. While the VIP guests clink champagne glasses in exchange for their multi-thousand-dollar social media moments, the reality behind the curtain feels somewhat less exclusive than the glossy marketing brochures originally suggested. Despite the massive media buildup, the relentless promotional campaigns, and the global headlines surrounding the Duchess's arrival, the 300-guest event was reportedly still offering last-minute availability just 72 hours before the doors officially opened. Furthermore, as the weekend commenced, it quickly emerged through local reporting that many standard ticket holders, those who had paid nearly $3,000 for the promise of elite wellness and networking, found themselves booked into twin-share rooms with complete strangers. It was a logistical detail that noticeably clashed with the high-end, luxury branding of an exclusive retreat, leaving a lingering sense of commercial opportunism rather than genuine hospitality. Unsurprisingly, the Australian public is watching all of this unfold with a highly critical eye, and the national sentiment has shifted dramatically since the honeymoon phase of 2018. As everyday citizens navigate a challenging economic climate marked by stubborn inflation, housing pressures, and the rising costs of daily living, the sight of a publicly funded police escort being utilized to facilitate a private, commercial business trip has struck a deep, unforgiving nerve. A grassroots movement, spearheaded by the civic organization Beyond Australia, has rapidly gained momentum, launching a digital petition that quickly amassed over 45,000 signatures in a matter of days. The collective frustration of the tax-paying public is perhaps best captured by a prevailing sentiment echoing endlessly across local media networks, editorial columns, and morning talk radio stations. We welcomed them as royalty 8 years ago, and now we are expected to foot the security bill for their selfie business? This is not merely a localized dispute over a security invoice or municipal spending. The events playing out under the Sydney Sun serve as the first highly visible symptom of a much larger, structural shift in how the public consumes and evaluates post-institutional fame. It represents the uncomfortable, defining moment when a royal aura, a concept historically rooted in public sacrifice, quiet stoicism, and unwavering service to the crown, is fully and unapologetically transformed into a consumer product. But the inherent challenge with treating a royal title as a commercial brand is that the brand eventually bumps into systems, rules, and social hierarchies that it can no longer unilaterally control, dictate, or transcend. Just days before the Australian Sun illuminated their commercial ventures, a very different kind of test awaited the Sussex brand in the wealthy, sun-drenched enclaves of California. The setting was Montecito, the exclusive coastal haven known for its privacy and staggering wealth. The location was the sprawling, immaculate private estate of Netflix Chief Executive Officer Ted Sarandos, who was hosting a highly exclusive, closely guarded celebration for the anticipated second season of the critically acclaimed hit series Beef. In the upper echelons of Hollywood, power is rarely announced with a microphone or a formal press release. It is communicated through a complex, delicate web of unspoken rules, strategic seating arrangements, and subtle visual cues. A room full of A-list actors, influential directors, and elite studio executives operates on a strict, invisible hierarchy that must be respected by anyone wishing to remain inside the inner circle. For this particular evening, the unspoken dress code was widely understood by the seasoned attendees to be muted and elegant, a sophisticated, quiet canvas of blacks, crisp whites, and tailored neutrals. This visual quietness was not accidental, nor was it merely a stylistic preference. It was specifically designed with a purpose. It was meant to allow the guest of honor, the highly respected, Academy Award-nominated British actress Carey Mulligan, to stand out in a vibrant, singular pop of color, visually establishing her as the focal point of the celebration. But as the evening unfolded, and the fleet of luxury vehicles pulled through the heavily guarded gates, that carefully orchestrated visual harmony was abruptly broken. Meghan Markle arrived at the gathering not in a complimentary neutral tone that would blend into the background, but in a striking $715 Heidi Merrick dress. The color of the garment was chartreuse, a vivid, electric shade of spring green that demands immediate visual attention. It was, unmistakably, the exact same striking hue chosen by the guest of honor. In an industry that runs entirely on subtle social cues, visual positioning, and the meticulous curation of optics, a wardrobe choice of this nature is rarely viewed by industry veterans as a simple, innocent accident. In Hollywood, choosing the wrong color at the wrong time, especially a color that perfectly mirrors the individual the event is specifically meant to celebrate, can easily be interpreted as a distinct desperation for the spotlight. The visual collision was immediate. The quiet, polite murmurs in the room soon spilled over into the relentless, gossipy machinery of the entertainment media. While some prominent fashion defenders, celebrity stylists, and style magazines quickly argued it was merely an unfortunate coincidence, driven by the latest spring trends dictated by global fashion houses, the underlying tension remained unresolved. In a room that demands an intuitive, almost flawless understanding of social geometry, it looked like a profound miscalculation. The situation became even more opaque and heavily scrutinized when several high-profile images of the Duchess from the party were later quietly removed from Getty Images, the premier photo syndication agency for the entertainment industry. The images vanished, reportedly over vague, unspecified issues concerning image approval and quality control, a move that only fueled further speculation about the intense curation of their public image. This incident, whether a genuine styling oversight or a deliberate sartorial strategy, reveals a fascinating ongoing psychological paradox at the very heart of the Sussex narrative. The couple stepped away from the British monarchy, citing the unbearable weight of institutional protocol, the lack of personal agency, and the relentless, suffocating intrusion of the press. They argued that the system did not allow them to simply exist as human beings. Yet, they have landed squarely in a Hollywood ecosystem that possesses its own rigid, unforgiving protocols. You cannot continuously position yourself as a figure seeking a quiet, private existence while simultaneously making choices that place you squarely in the center of the frame at someone else's professional celebration. Hollywood does not necessarily mind a scandal. In fact, the industry often monetizes controversy quite successfully, but the elite circles are deeply intolerant of those who consistently fail to read the room. An unspoken rule in the entertainment capital is that you must understand when to take the stage and when to applaud politely from the audience. The brand is increasingly finding itself caught between the burning desire for global relevance and the rapidly diminishing returns of its own visibility. When a brand is built entirely on the premise of escaping attention, deliberately courting it creates a dissonance that the public inevitably begins to reject. But while the entertainment industry comfortably debates the nuances of dress codes, celebrity positioning, and the shifting dynamics of California royalty, a storm of an entirely different, historical magnitude was already breaking over London. The ancient institution they walked away from was no longer concerning itself with red carpet etiquette or transatlantic public relations skirmishes. The crown was busy dealing with a profound existential threat from within its own bloodline, a crisis that required an entirely different level of institutional resolve and a suspension of familial sentimentality. The shift in the narrative surrounding Prince Andrew did not happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing deterioration of public standing over several years. But when the tipping point finally arrived in the early months of 2026, it was undeniably seismic. The long-awaited release of newly unsealed legal documents regarding the late financier Jeffrey Epstein changed the global conversation entirely. If the allegations and implications contained within those extensive files are accurate, the crisis moved far beyond the realm of poor personal judgment, moral bankruptcy, or unsavory friendships. The focus of the British government and the international press intensified sharply on the years between 2010 and 2011. This was a critical, highly active period when Andrew served as the United Kingdom's special representative for international trade and investment. What made this new wave of information politically explosive was the specific, official nature of the role he held. As a trade envoy, Andrew was not traveling the world as a private citizen on holiday. He was entrusted with highly sensitive economic data, valuable industry secrets, and top-level diplomatic access. He crossed the globe to champion British business interests, representing the state and flying on the taxpayer's dime. The prevailing perception in Westminster and among the British public, fair or not, was that this government-sanctioned, state-funded access had been dangerously and unacceptably entangled with the Epstein network. The public and political conversation abruptly shifted from a tabloid tale of a disgraced royal to the severe, highly legal territory of potential misconduct in public office. The British monarchy has faced severe internal crises before. Historians and constitutional experts quickly drew quiet, chilling parallels to 1936, the year the institution had to carefully and decisively remove the reign of Edward VIII to save the structural integrity of the crown during the abdication crisis. The survival instinct of the palace is ancient, heavily practiced, and entirely unsentimental when the core of the institution is threatened. Recognizing that the monarchy relies entirely on the trust of the elected government and the ongoing consent of the people, King Charles and his most senior advisors made a cold, mathematically necessary calculation. The liability had to be completely, unmistakably severed from the working machinery of the state. The dismantling of Andrew's remaining status was methodical, absolute, and unrelenting. In a quiet but constitutionally devastating move, a letters patent was issued on the 3rd of November 2025. This legal instrument formally and permanently stripped him of his Royal Highness styling, meaning he could no longer act in any capacity that represented the sovereign. The invisible, historical shield of deference was gone. Shortly thereafter, he was quietly but firmly moved out of the grand, 30-room Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park. This was a physical eviction that perfectly mirrored his institutional exile. The protective insulation of the establishment, the seasoned aides, the elite legal buffers, the palace communications machinery was entirely stripped away, leaving him fully exposed to the harsh, unfiltered realities of the justice system. The climax of this institutional severing arrived on the morning of the 18th of February 2026. On a damp gray morning at the Sandringham estate, The flashing blue lights of police vehicles cut through the thick Norfolk fog, creating a stark, jarring contrast to the quiet grandeur of the royal property. Through rain-speckled glass, the man who once commanded global diplomacy traveled with armed protection officers and enjoyed the ultimate, unquestioned privileges of birth, now sat alone in the back of a police vehicle. He was being driven away from the secluded wood farm to the Aylsham police station for formal questioning by local detectives. The emotional shockwave that rippled across the British public was profound. It was a complex mixture of lingering disbelief, profound national embarrassment, and a grim, sobering acknowledgement that justice must ultimately be blind to titles and lineage. The visual of a reigning monarch's brother being processed by local authorities shattered any remaining illusion of aristocratic immunity in the modern age. The very next day, on February 19, the reality of the new royal era was cemented in ink. King Charles released a brief, perfectly calibrated statement addressing the situation from Buckingham Palace. Expressing his deepest concern regarding the gravity of the allegations and his profound sympathy for the victims who had suffered, the statement concluded with a definitive, unyielding phrase that effectively closed the heavy iron door on his brother: the law must take its course. The monarchy had officially, unequivocally stepped aside, leaving Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to face the consequences of his own history as a private citizen. This ruthless internal housecleaning was not merely about individual punishment or familial discipline. It was about preserving the ultimate, invaluable currency of the crown, its political and social legitimacy. The institution was actively demonstrating its capacity to purge its own ranks to ensure its survival into the next century. And that newly fortified, thoroughly tested legitimacy was about to be put on a spectacular global display on the world's biggest diplomatic stage. Between April 27 and the 30th of April 2026, the global media shifted its intense, unwavering focus to Washington, D.C. The United States was in the fever pitch of celebrating the 250th anniversary of its independence, a moment of profound national reflection, patriotism, and geopolitical stock-taking. Arriving into this highly charged, historical atmosphere was King Charles III, alongside Queen Camilla, embarking on a landmark state visit that would capture the attention of the world and reaffirm the strongest alliance in modern history. As the equivalent of Air Force One touched down, the king was greeted with full military honors, the playing of national anthems, and the kind of meticulous, grand-scale protocol that only a visiting head of state commands. The carefully curated itinerary of the visit was a masterclass in the projection of soft power. The king held high-level meetings with top government officials, engaging in highly publicized diplomatic sit-downs designed to reinforce transatlantic economic and security ties. But the absolute pinnacle of the visit occurred when the king addressed a joint session of the United States Congress, an incredibly rare, historical honor, marking only the second time a British monarch had done so since his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, addressed the chamber in 1991 following the Gulf War. As he stood before the lawmakers of the nation that had once famously and violently rebelled against his ancestors 2.5 centuries ago, the weight of the moment was palpable. He did not speak of personal grievances, private family struggles, or the relentless noise of the modern media landscape. He spoke eloquently of shared history, the enduring architecture of Western alliances, the defense of democratic values, and the absolute necessity of global stability in an increasingly fractured world. This is the stark, undeniable contrast between constitutional duty and commercialized royalty. Official duty creates deep, historical legitimacy. It operates on a timeline of centuries, building bridges between nations and securing treaties. Celebrity attention, driven by algorithms, podcast rankings, and PR cycles, only creates fleeting, easily forgotten noise. The Crown in Washington was not selling VIP access, charging an entrance fee for photographs, or promoting a lifestyle brand to a limited audience of consumers. It was cementing diplomatic architecture, representing the weight of a nation, and utilizing its ancient mystique to foster modern geopolitical cooperation. Yet, in the highly choreographed world of international statecraft, what is entirely absent from the schedule is often just as loud, if not louder, than what is prominently included. Despite spending 4 highly publicized days in the United States, surrounded by the world's press corps and operating at the absolute highest levels of global visibility, the king's official itinerary pointedly did not include a trip to the West Coast. There was no detour to California. There was no private family reunion neatly packaged for the cameras. No quiet, leaked dinner to signal a thawing of familial tensions to the public. In the realm of royal diplomacy, absence itself becomes a definitive, calculated statement. The logistical reality is that a king does not simply slip away unnoticed. Any meeting would have required massive security coordination and inevitably leaked to the press, overshadowing the entire state visit. The king was demonstrating to the world, and to his own government, that official state business would not be hijacked by familial drama. The prestige of the crown would not be utilized to provide a halo of validation to those who had voluntarily stepped outside the boundaries of the institution. The exact same logic that dictated the removal of Prince Andrew applied here. The institution's integrity supersedes personal relationships, and the crown does not validate breakaway factions. It is the ultimate split screen of the modern era, capturing vastly different trajectories born from the exact same historical heritage. On one side, an American capital bathed in the golden glow of a diplomatic triumph, with a monarch receiving the standing ovations of a global superpower, his relevance anchored firmly by his unwavering adherence to duty. The institution he represents is functioning exactly as it was designed to, serving as a beacon of continuity in a chaotic world. On the other side, we witness the fractured, complicated realities of those who operate outside the palace gates. In a quiet police station in Norfolk, a man learns the hard way that the absolute privileges of birth cannot shield him from the reach of the law, the scrutiny of the state, or the judgment of history. He traded the responsibilities of his role for proximity to power and wealth, and found himself entirely abandoned by the system that once protected him. And in the wealthy, sun-drenched enclaves of California and the rented hotel ballrooms of Australia, a brand built almost entirely on the memory of royal proximity finds itself continuously wrestling with the diminishing returns of its own visibility. They left the firm to find freedom and tell their truth, but they ended up trapped in a relentless cycle of self-promotion, learning that attention is not the same thing as respect, and that selling access to a world you actively chose to abandon is a business model with a very short shelf life. The events of early 2026 serve as a profound, enduring lesson in the mechanics of power, the weight of history, and the ultimate price of relevance. The British monarchy has survived centuries of political upheaval, social revolution, and global warfare, not through sentimentality, flexibility, or a desire to be universally loved by every demographic. It has survived through a cold, uncompromising instinct for self-preservation and a deep understanding of its constitutional role. It understands a fundamental, unshakable truth that those who step away often fail to realize: the institution is always greater, older, and more vital than the individual. When faced with an existential threat, whether it is a scandal of international proportions that threatens the integrity of the state, or a relentless, exhausting campaign of public relations from former members seeking to monetize their heritage, the response is ultimately, inevitably the same. The monarchy does not negotiate with its own liabilities. It simply moves forward, leaving the noise behind, secure in the knowledge that while celebrities fade with the changing seasons, the crown endures.